Hi, everybody. Bill Prince here. Welcome to our discussion on Chapter 24, which deals with laws involving consumer protection. You know, Kermit the Frog, the famous Muppet, once said that it's not easy being green. It's also not easy being a consumer in 2016, 2017, and the years surrounding that. Products have gotten that much more complicated. Financial products have gotten that much more complicated. And as a consumer, you're really sort of out there on your own trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong, and how to protect yourself. So that's what we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about in Chapter 24. Obviously, the issue of deceptive advertising has been around probably since there have been cave paintings, advertising clubs and animal skins and things of that nature. But it's easier today, I think, to probably engage in this practice of deceptive advertising. What with the internet and email and the many ways that businesses, both legitimate and illegitimate, attempt to reach out to us in order to save their goods and wear or sell their goods and wear. Again, some of these tools and techniques have been around for a long time. Some of them have been redeveloped to deal with the computer age, but the net effect of them is all the same, which is to separate us from our money and maybe not necessarily give us what we think we are getting. Deceptive advertising is advertising that misleads consumers either by making unjustified claims regarding a product's composition, qualities, sponsorship, or performance, or by omitting a material fact concerning the product's composition, quality, sponsorship, or performance. I think many of us, have seen deceptive advertising quite a bit, and there's obviously a difference between, mere puffing, which would be this is the world's greatest cup of coffee, this will get your clothes whiter than anything else. I think most of us realize that those kinds of things are just kind of boasting and puffing, and we know that this will not be the world's best cup of coffee, or that this is not the greatest piece of pie that will ever be served, and we kind of take that with a grain of salt and move on. But when something is fundamentally related to a product or service's performance, and that is either intentionally or unintentionally left out, modified, changed, that can certainly be an issue that could bring the authorities in. There's also what's known as bait and switch advertising, which is where one product is sort of put out there for sale, and then when you get to the store or try to buy the thing online, it's not available, and the sales people will try to move you into something that's maybe more expensive. And again, we used to see this a lot with furniture ads, where some of these discount furniture stores would advertise a couch or a chair at an extremely low price, and then you would get in there and, oh well, we only had one of those and we sold that a long time ago, but here's another chair, wouldn't you like to buy that? And oh, by the way, it's $300 more. So that's what bait and switch advertising is. And then, of course, the law being the law, and still having trouble to catch up with modern technology, the law still is having a little bit of trouble dealing with online deceptive advertising. And as indicated here, the Federal Trade Commission, which is the governmental agency that regulates such things, has issued guidelines that require online advertising to be the following: be truthful and not misleading, not make claims that cannot be substantiated, not cause or likely to cause substantial consumer injuries that consumers cannot reasonably avoid, and then clearly and conspicuously disclose any qualifying or limiting information. Now, that sort of thing should apply basically to any kind of advertising, but it's also broad and general enough where it's oftentimes difficult to enforce. The Federal Trade Commission is the entity that's charged with making these rules and regulations and enforcing these actions. And generally speaking, if after the FTC determines that the advertisement in question is unfair or deceptive, it will send a letter or complaint to the advertiser, and oftentimes that'll be in the form sort of a cease and desist letter, where it says, hey, pull this thing, stop it, correct it, whatever, and sort of giving them an opportunity to resolve the problem without further intervention. But if the advertiser refuses to do that, then the FTC can basically, again, issue another cease and desist order, which is formal and would have the effect of court behind it, require the advertiser to counter advertise, in other words, say, hey, we lied about this, or impose a multiple product order, which would require the advertiser to cease and desist from falsely advertising all of the firm's products or services. So that's a pretty drastic move there. The title of this bill ought to tell you kind of how dated it is, but the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, which prohibits telephone solicitation using automatic dialing system or pre-recorded voice, and transmitting ads via fax without first obtaining recipient's permission. How many times do we, get something across our fax machine that's an ad? We do at our office. I mean, our fax machine is sort of in the corner anymore, collecting dust because with emails and texts. I mean, good Lord, fax machine is so 1990s. But we will still occasionally get, solicitations from travel agencies and things like that, advertising quick and inexpensive cruises and trips to Mexico and things of that nature. And then, landlines are really sort of becoming a thing of the past. I think most people don't even have a landline in their home anymore. Unfortunately, we're starting to see some of these solicitations move from landlines to cell phones, and that can be problematic. Under the FTC telemarketing sales rule, a telemarketer must initially inform the recipient of the seller's name and the product being sold. And in addition, the telemarketer, again, if you haven't hung up on them before they got 3 words out of their mouth, need to refrain from misrepresenting information. They need to inform those they call of the cost of the goods, any restrictions on obtaining or using the goods, and whether the sale will be final and non-refundable. They must remove a consumer's name from the contact list if the consumer requests it. And then back in 2003, the FTC created a national do not call registry, and many states have this as well, with the idea of stopping people from bothering you at home to try to sell you goods and services. With regard to consumer protection, there are also a number of labeling and packaging laws, and the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act, which is a federal law, it requires product labels to identify, what's in there, how much of whatever it is in there, who manufactured it, the packager and distributor who packaged it and distributed it, and then if the package contains foodstuffs, various nutritional information. And of course, like everything else in the world, this has obviously become very politicized, that some manufacturers are not wanting to put in nutritional information. My theory is if somebody doesn't want to tell me something about a product they're selling me, I get instantly suspicious. And so the more information I have, the more I like it. But a lot of folks don't want to do that disclosure. There are several other labeling and packaging acts as well that your book talks about, and those include the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act, the Comprehensive Smokeless Tobacco Health Education Act, the Wool Product Labeling Act, and the Flammable Fabrics Act. And again, all of these are sort of designed to provide additional information to protect the consumer from the natural and unintentional consequences of the use of the product in question. Famous in federal regulations dealing with consumer protection is the infamous Regulation Z, which sounds like some kind of a zombie movie or something like that. But Regulation Z came into play after some pretty awful conduct on the part of banks and lending institutions and others who were providing sales contracts, long-term sales contracts, and credit contracts. And Regulation Z basically provides that a cooling off period is to be afforded in every sort of transaction that Regulation Z covers. And these cooling off periods essentially allow you to basically terminate a deal if somebody has come to your door and tried to sell you a timeshare or siding or new roof or something like that. Again, door-to-door sales, we still periodically will get somebody knocking on our door wanting to, put a new satellite dish in or something like that. But again, the times have changed such that the old Fuller Brush men are kind of a dinosaur. but basically, some of this has been expanded to cover other things, including telephone and mail order sales, used car sales, funeral planning and handling, real estate sales and lending, and they're trying to see if we can't include online sales as well. So the idea being that if somebody has been forced, and again, forced may be too strong of a word, but coerced or pressured into getting involved in some sort of deal, Regulation Z allows these cooling off periods to exist. Additionally, products have become more and more complicated as we've gone through time. And, in the old days, we used to have a thing called caveat emptor, which was let the buyer beware. And that sort of put the onus on the consumer, to do their own homework about the effectiveness and the harms and the benefits of a product. But, today, products have become so complicated that really we need some help. And so there have been some pretty significant regulations put into effect. Now, whether under the new administration these will remain in effect or not remains to be seen. But we have the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration, and they basically protect us against adulterated and misbranded food and drugs. They regulate the food quality. They make sure the food that we eat isn't going to kill us because of some sort of manufacturing defect or process mishandling. They also approve all prescription and over-the-counter drugs before they may be sold to the public, and they also have the authority to pull food and drugs from public distribution that may be harming us. So I think that gives us quite a bit of peace of mind in the fact that we don't have to think every meal we're going to eat is going to be our last because of mishandling. We also have the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the CPSC, which basically conducts research on product safety and maintains a clearinghouse on products that may have certain harms to us. And so that's a good place to go if you have questions about a particular product you're buying. Generally, the CPSC requires notice from distributors if those distributors receive information that their products are dangerous or create an unreasonable risk of injury and death. And so if they find that out, they need to notify the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and then potentially a recall can be put in place or hopefully notice can be sent out to the consumers. And, if you watch the news from time to time, you'll see that, a company that makes, baby swings or car seats or things like that have detected a flaw in their product, and it's because of the CPSC that information is getting out to us. All right. There's also a lot of things going on in the world of finance, payday loans, all the way up to regular bank loans from your bank, and because there have been a number of pirates involved in that field, the government has sort of cracked down in terms of disclosures and things like that need to be made when somebody goes and borrows money for a car or a home or whatever it is they're borrowing money from and for. And the Truth in Lending Act requires that all terms of a credit instrument be clearly and conspicuously disclosed and permit the consumer to cancel or rescind any contract if the creditor fails to comply with the Truth in Lending Act's requirements. So, when you buy a house or really buy anything over time, this is, there used to be a time when you would not necessarily have to be informed of how much this was all going to cost you, because you might be buying a $5,000 car, but by the time that you add the interest and the handling fees and that sort of thing, it could be $12,000, and in the past that was never needed to be disclosed, but under the Truth in Lending Act, it now is. Additionally, and this is an important thing, under credit card rules from TILA, if somebody gets a hold of your credit card, and does an unauthorized transaction, again, it limits your liability to $50, and and that's a good thing, because if we were potentially going to be on the hook for every bit of fraud that occurred, not through our own fault, but potentially through breaches in the store or the airline or whatever, who would do business on credit and who would do business with those people. And so, in this day and age, when we're reading almost every day about a new breach from some store or hotel, it's good to have those protections in place. All right, let's see, how much do we want to talk about this? you can look and see what the 2010 amendments did to the Truth in Lending Act, and again, this sort of prevents the credit card companies from jacking your interest rates without notice or without good reason, limiting the fees and that kind of thing as well. All right. Another thing, and again, I think any of us who have credit or have gotten credit or whatever, know how important it is for our credit report to be accurate, because a bad credit report or a good credit report can have an impact on the amount that we're going to pay on interest, whether we can get that home loan or that car loan, and as a matter of fact, some employers are actually now looking at people's credit reports in making hiring decisions. So, the information that's contained in our credit report, is pretty significant. And I think many people, despite all the commercials on TV, don't even look and see what their credit score is or what appears on their credit report. And if you haven't done it, I certainly would encourage you to do so, because frankly, there's lots and lots of mistakes that appear in these documents. And the Fair Credit Reporting Act basically sets up some rules and guidelines that talks about what can be on these reports, how accurate they have to be, and what you guys can do about it if you find out that there's something wrong on that report. It's not always easy to get changed, but at least there's a mechanism by which to do it. So take a peek at this, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, both on this slide and as is discussed in your text. Another thing that has become an issue is fair debt collecting, and again, when I was still in private practice before I went into the public sector, I would get a lot of calls from clients, potential clients, who were in financial difficulties and things like that, and I mean they were basically just being unmercifully harassed by these debt collectors that were calling them at all hours of the day and night, bothering them at work, just really engaging in some pretty Byzantine collection practices. And under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, a lot of those were clamped down on. And as you can see here, the act prohibits people who are trying to collect a debt from contacting people at their job unless the employer allows that. Prevents them from contacting the debtor at inconvenient or unusual times. Contacting third parties. So in other words, if they started calling me, on behalf of some debt my son had, they couldn't do that. Generally harassing or intimidating the debtor. And those kinds of things. So the bill tried to, I guess, civilize the collection of debt practices. But again, if you talk to people who are in some financial difficulties, it doesn't seem like it's done it as well as maybe it should. Okay, well, just a real quick discussion of some credit issues and consumer matters, and we will visit with you again in our next chapter. Have a great day.